You could walk away with your name clean, or stay and watch everything fall apart, including your daughter. That's what Carter Beauregard whispered to Mari Quinn the day they came to take the animals. The gates of her late father's sanctuary had barely reopened when secrets long buried clawed their way to the surface. Corruption, betrayal, a legacy at stake. But the loudest truths don't always come from human mouths. Sometimes they come from the sound of hooves at dawn. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Rain tapped against the tin roof like fingers drumming on a kitchen counter. Inside the flower shop, Mari Quinn kept her eyes low hands, busy arranging lilies that had just been returned. The paper wrapping was still damp from the hearse door. They said it wasn't appropriate, Mrs. Blaylock muttered from behind the counter, flipping a receipt over. Didn't want funeral flowers picked by her. Their words, Mari didn't respond. Her fingers tightened around the ribbon she was tying. The stems snapped slightly under pressure, but she didn't loosen her grip. Layla sat cross-legged on a faded cushion in the corner, pencil resting on her lip math worksheet forgotten in her lap. She heard it. Of course she did. But she didn't ask. Instead, she glanced at her mother, then back at her notebook. The front bell jingled. Rain gusted in behind the mailman, who gave a polite nod and handed Mari a thick envelope sealed in wax. She wiped her hands on her apron before taking it, her expression unchanged. He hesitated, then left without a word. Mrs. Blaylock squinted at the seal as she passed by. "Estate court," she said flatly. "Someone died," Mari gave no reply. She turned toward the backroom envelope pressed against her chest, as though it might burn through. Halfway there, she halted and tore it open. Her breath snagged, but only for an instant. The letter named her sole heir to a rural property on the edge of town. Quinn Hollow Sanctuary. At the bottom, stamped clearly, her father's name, Silas Quinn. She hadn't spoken that name aloud in over 20 years. Mrs. Blaylock's voice came again, quieter now. "Not all legacies are left in kindness." Mari folded the paper with deliberate care, slipped it back into the envelope, then drifted toward the window. Rain blurred the glass cars inching by as if the world had no intention of stopping for her discovery. Across the room, Layla tapped her phone. A search result blinked on the screen, Quinn Hollow Sanctuary. The image took its time, loading a wooden archway, strangled by vines, its letters almost swallowed by moss. Beneath it, faded gray text read, "Closed since 2007. She looked up, waiting for her mother to notice. Mari stood fixed in place, unmoving. Layla's thumb lingered above the screen, the glow casting her face in pale light, before she slid the device into her pocket. The quiet inside the shop thickened, carrying the weight of places long abandoned. That same heavy hush trailed Mari into the town hall the following evening, folding itself beneath the drone of overhead lights that filled the chamber like a low, invisible fog. Maplewood's monthly community meeting had drawn an unusually large crowd. Folding chairs lined the paneled walls, occupied by faces Mari hadn't seen in years, people once passed in grocery aisles or glimpsed whispering across pews, their jackets dripped with rain, but their gazes stayed sharp, expectant. Mari chose a seat near the edge, close to the wall, hoping distance might grant invisibility. It didn't. Not here. Not when everyone already knew who she was. Her hands twisted together in her lap, knuckles stark against her coat. Only when a woman across the aisle raised her voice did Mari lift her eyes. "Well, she didn't come to the funeral," Lorraine Quinn declared loudly enough for half the room to hear. "But now she shows up soon as there's land involved. Some timing, huh?" A few glanced toward Mari, then quickly looked away. She forced herself to remain still, though it cost her more than she cared to admit. Her stomach curled into Knott's shoulders, aching from the effort of composure. Layla, 2 seats down, caught the shift in her mother's breathing and looked over without a word. Councilman Rollins cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and nodded toward the next speaker on the list. Carter Beauregard stepped up to the podium like he was walking onto a stage he knew by heart. Everything about him said confidence, tailored blazer, clean shave, voice steady and warm. "I won't take much of your time," he began, pressing a remote in his hand. A map appeared on the projector screen behind him, Quinn Hollow in bright green outlined in red. "What we see here is 112 acres of underutilized, neglected land. A place once meant for preservation, now choked by decay." He clicked again. An aerial shot showed the barn with a half-collapsed roof, rusted fencing brush growing wild. The image lingered a second too long. Our proposal is simple. We want to bring life back. An eco-resort built sustainably with local jobs and environmental respect at its core. Murmurs of approval slipped through the room. An older man near the front leaned over and whispered to his wife, nodding slowly. Carter paused, then went on. But we also need to be honest about the past. Mr. Silas Quinn was once a respected figure in Maplewood, but by the end he was under investigation for illegal wildlife housing, unpermitted structures, and possible health violations. There are reports of disease outbreaks among animals, some of which were never identified or removed. Mari's jaw tightened. Her hands balled into fists deep in her coat pockets. He meant well, perhaps, Carter added with practiced empathy, but good intentions don't erase consequences. Our town deserves transparency and safety moving forward. He stepped back, clearly pleased. The projector screen stayed lit behind him, casting the barn's ruins across the room, like a ghost too large to ignore. Then from the third row, if it's that dangerous, why does it still smell like cookies every morning? Layla's voice cut through the hush, like a thread pulled taut. She didn't raise her hand. She simply spoke. A ripple moved through the room. Several people twisted in their chairs. Mari stared at her daughter, throat thickening. Layla's straightened chin lifted slightly. Her expression held no smile. Carter faltered only briefly. "Pardon me," he asked, recovering with practiced ease. "I've been there," Layla said. "There's still cinnamon. Every morning. You think a rotten place smells like that?" His lips twitched, caught between smirk and scowl. "Sweetheart, I'm sure your memory's lovely." But Mari rose. The legs of her chair scraped the floor. She walked into the aisle with slow, deliberate steps, as though the whole room were watching, which they were. From her coat, she drew a folded sheet of yellowed paper and placed it in the hands of a councilwoman near the front. The woman squinted, then read aloud. "Not every place gets to be called a home, but if something is still breathing, there's somebody should stay." Silence thickened. Mary didn't linger. She turned toward the exit. Carter's mouth pressed into a thin, unreadable line as he tracked her departure. Outside, the sky had brightened. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and smelling of metal and moss. Sunlight bounced off windshields, sharp and white. Mari paused on the steps, then pulled out her phone, dialed the number memorized from the envelope, and lifted it to her ear. "I want to see the property," she said. The next day, tires crunched slowly over the gravel path, the sound making Mari tense without meaning to. Trees heavy with ivy leaned across the road, dimming the light. Somewhere ahead, a rustle-stirred bird or something else. Layla leaned forward in the passenger seat, hands pressed to the window eyes, straining for the gate. There, she whispered before Mary spotted it. Quinn Hollow Sanctuary, or what was left of it. The gate sagged under its own weight, wooden beams bowed like tired shoulders. Vines strangled the posts. The sign to the left, once bold and green, had lost nearly all its paint. Only faint traces of the words remained: sanctuary. Do not enter without key. A chain hung uselessly across the latch, already snapped in two. Layla unbuckled and jumped out before Mari had fully parked. She ran toward the gate, skidding to a stop just short of it. Her nose wrinkled, not in disgust but recognition. Smells like hay and sunflower seeds. Mari joined her more cautiously. The air carried something unexpected. Not rot, not abandonment. Dry grass, something nutty and faintly the scent of earth still being turned. She pushed the gate. It groaned but swung open. The land beyond wasn't empty. Animals moved in loose clusters. Chickens pecked near overturned troughs. A goat limped across a dirt path, ears flicking. Dogs, at least a dozen, lounged under the shade of an oak, their eyes tracking Mari but not rising. No barks, no frenzy. Only the quiet thrum of life where emptiness had been expected. Layla crept beside a sheep and brushed its wool as if afraid it might vanish. Mari passed the old barn roof patched with tarp doors ajar. Through the slats she glimpsed rows of metal pens, buckets lined up neatly, medical gloves still sealed in a cracked plastic box, a clipboard hanging from a hook. She hadn't expected order. At the far edge of the clearing near the ruins of a greenhouse, a figure appeared from behind a rain barrel. A woman in her mid-50s, sturdy frame gray, streaks in her braid boots caked with mud. She carried a feed bucket in one hand and a wrench in the other. Mari froze. The woman didn't. "You must be Marie." Her voice was rough, not unkind. She set the bucket down and extended her hand. I'm Isla Harper. Used to come here every week until we weren't allowed. Mary hesitated, then took it. I didn't know anyone else still, she began. Most don't. I stayed close, though. Silas and I worked together. Sort of. Isla wiped her palm on her jeans. We built something here. Not everyone understood it. Mari scanned the clearing again. Dogs, goats, even a fox curled beneath a broken bench. They're still alive, she murmured. Isla stepped closer, voice low. That's the part they never believed. People think when a man's labeled unstable or illegal, or whatever word suits them best, everything he touched must have been broken too. But look around. If he was wrong, why are they still here? Mari offered no reply. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, lifting dust and feathers. Layla called from near a collapsed haystack. Mom, there's something weird back here. The two women walked over. Layla pointed down. Beneath layers of straw and faded tarp, a corner of metal jutted out dull gray, rust eating at the edges. Mari crouched, shoved aside the hay, and tugged until the box came free with a gritty sound. A padlock dangled broken from the latch. Within, wrapped under a folded flannel shirt, lay a small black ledger. She opened it. The pages had softened with age corners sticking. Neatly inked rows filled each sheet, dates, animal names, microchip IDs, and rescue locations. Ohio, Missouri, Alabama. Hundreds of entries. Mary turned to Isla. Did you know about this? No, she said quietly. But I'm not surprised. She traced one line with her fingertip. Silas never bragged, never asked for applause. He just kept saving them. Mari looked up, not at Isla, not at Layla, but toward the barn. One of the dogs had moved to the entrance and stood watching her tail, giving a single slow wag. Beyond it, the dark outline of the storage shed waited, door sagging, half hidden by shadow. Mari pushed open that warped door, dust stirring, as the hinges resisted before giving way with a groan that echoed off the sagging beams. A shaft of light broke through the slats in the ceiling, catching motes in the air like flecks of ash. Somewhere near the back, a chain clinked gently, wind or something that had moved not long ago. Mari stepped over a pile of splintered wood boots, brushing aside straw. Against the far wall stood a battered desk, its surface stained from old water leaks and oil. Drawers hung crookedly, half open. On top sat the black ledger they'd found now, accompanied by a few loose envelopes, their corners curled like dried leaves. She opened the ledger again. Names, numbers, dates. The second page listed towns she didn't recognize. Next to each, a red line had been drawn through it. The lines weren't clean. They looked angry. A few pages in, she noticed one had been torn out completely. Below the last entry, something peeked out a fold of thick yellowed paper. She tugged it free and carefully unfolded the creases. A map. Hand-drawn in red and blue pen, its edges frayed. Thin red veins connected dots labeled with initials CC03, W Ridge R07. Some were circled, some crossed out. That's not just a delivery route, she murmured. Isla stood just behind her, arms folded tight. It's the old network, she said quietly. Silas used to track which rescue spots were still active. Most of them aren't. Mari ran a finger along one line that ended abruptly, marked with an X. How did he even keep all this going? Isla didn't answer right away. Her mouth pressed into a line. He got creative and quiet. After the federal warning, he knew they were watching him. Paperwork, licenses, they revoked everything. Mari looked up. They tried to arrest him almost. He was supposed to be in court, but the case fell apart. Witness recanted file went missing. No one ever figured out why. Mari stared back at the map. Her pulse quickened, not from fear exactly, but from a kind of disorientation. What she had once dismissed as eccentricity now revealed itself as something deliberate, almost methodical. Layla's voice floated from behind a stack of crates. Mom, what's this thing? She crouched near a shelf tucked in a shadowed corner. Mari walked over and saw what her daughter had uncovered, an outdated security camera coated in dust, its cable unplugged but intact. Next to it sat a plastic bag holding a cracked USB stick. Mari exchanged a look with Isla before sliding the device into an old laptop they had brought from the truck. The screen flickered, the hard drive whirred louder than expected. A single video file appeared. The image resolved grainy, the timestamp blinking from 10 years earlier. The angle captured the shed near the desk. At first, nothing moved. Then two figures entered the frame. One she recognized immediately, Silas. Thinner than she remembered, eyes hollow but still unmistakable. The second man wore a collared jacket and leaned on the desk with the confidence of someone who believed the space belonged to him. His face never turned fully toward the camera, but his voice cut through sharper than the fuzz of the recording. "They'll buy it, Silas. You hand it over, I clean up the permits. You get to keep the house, no more questions." Silas stayed silent. The man pressed harder. "You think hiding these things makes you noble? You're a hoarder with a fence." Silas spoke once before the video ended. "Maybe, but I don't burn what I can't own." The feed froze on that frame. Mari tapped pause. A heavy stillness followed until Layla leaned closer to the screen. "Did he say Beauregard?" The name lingered. Mari gave no reply. She turned back to the desk, scanning for more papers, more proof, anything to explain how her father had gone from respected to erased. Her heartbeat slowed into something weightier, not calm, but dense. Isla stepped back, reaching for the map without a word. Mari studied her longer than necessary. In the curve of Isla's shoulders, in the way her fingers traveled the red lines, there was knowledge. Not mere memory, familiarity. Words weren't needed. Even as the air thickened in the shed, Mari's thoughts had already leapt forward to the meeting Isla had arranged and to the people waiting beyond these walls. Later, Mary lingered in the parking lot, hands still gripping the door handle. The windows of Daisy and Maple glowed warm behind the condensation silhouettes, shifting like shadows behind a curtain. She glanced at her jeans mud darkening the hem and brushed at it pointlessly. Layla, seated in the passenger seat, tilted her head. "They probably don't care what you're wearing." Mari forced a smile. "Maybe. Doesn't mean they won't talk about it." She pushed the door open. A bell chimed overhead as they stepped through. The cafe buzzed with noise. Every table held elbows pressed to wood mugs, clinking forks scraping ceramic. Conversations dipped a half octave as eyes followed her across the room. Some faces turned away quickly. Others did not. Isla waved from a corner table already filled by four others. None appeared eager to see Mari approaching. She offered polite greetings, names forgotten as soon as spoken, and slid into the chair beside Isla, who gave her a strained smile. "Thanks for coming," Isla whispered, nudging a menu across. "This is informal. Just community voices." Mari had no chance to open it. So said a man across the table, stirring his coffee with exaggerated patience. "Is it true the county found wild coyotes in the barn?" Mari blinked. "Coyotes? That's what I heard," another woman added, barely glancing up from her phone. "And something about goats with infections." Mari looked to Isla, whose lips pressed tight. "All the animals are stable," Mari replied evenly. "There are medical records. The sanctuary has documentation stretching back years." "Documentation from who?" though the woman asked, setting her phone down slowly. "Your father. You're aware he was investigated for trafficking, aren't you?" The words struck with the precision of someone who had rehearsed them. "He was never convicted," Isla inserted quickly, tone lighter than her eyes. A third voice murmured near the window. "Doesn't mean it wasn't true." Mari drew a sharp breath, metallic on her tongue. Not fear, not fury, but something between. Then the door opened. Heads turned. Carter Beauregard entered as though he owned the air itself. Charcoal wool coat, polished boots, gaze sweeping the cafe until it locked on Mari. He didn't wave. He simply walked toward her, nodding once to the waitress, his smile taut but practiced smooth. Isla shifted in her seat. "Carter." He ignored her, pulled a chair out, and sat. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said, voice pleasant. "You inherited a legend." Mari didn't answer. He reached into his coat, removed a cream-colored envelope, and set it on the table in front of her. "Here's an updated offer. $350,000. Cash. All closing costs handled on my side. I know lawyers can be expensive." Mari stared at the envelope without touching it. "It's generous," he continued, still smiling, "especially for land that, let's be honest, has a reputation. Your father kept things quiet for a long time, but the report's still out there. Wildlife trafficking, improper containment. You don't want that smoke hanging over your name, do you?" Around the table, forks paused mid-air. Someone shifted uncomfortably. No one objected. Mari felt heat rising in her chest, crawling into her face. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping backward. Layla, a few tables over with her cocoa, and drawing pad, looked up. Mari gave Isla a brief, unreadable glance before leaving the cafe without another word. The cold outside hit like a slap. Sunlight caught in puddles across the asphalt, reflecting pale gold. She reached the truck, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. A deep breath did nothing. Her hands shook anyway. Layla climbed in beside her, buckling the seatbelt slowly. They didn't clap for him, she said after a long pause. Mary started the engine. I mean, if Grandpa helped that many animals if he was so good, why didn't anyone say it out loud? Not even one person. Mari kept her grip tight on the steering wheel as the truck rolled from the curb. Layla turned toward the window, questions lingering in the narrow space between them. Mari kept her gaze locked ahead, the thought already shaping not where to flee but where answers might lie. By morning, a pale shaft of light slid through a crack in the barn wall and struck a dusty metal cabinet wedged in the far corner. She eased the drawer open, the rollers shrieking with age. Files stood in uneven rows. Paper yellowed and creased, some edges warped with water. Others scrawled with names she didn't know. One folder caught her eye. Typed forms filled its pages' margins, crowded with hurried notes. Photographs of battered animals clipped in place. At the top, a faded emblem was barely legible: QSAR, Quinn Sanctuary Animal Rescue 2002, 2005, 2007. Beneath, addresses of other shelters, most out of state, each slashed through with heavy red ink. Except one. She lifted the page. Isla leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching every move. This one, Mari murmured, tapping the margin. Still active, Isla pushed away from the frame and came closer. If it is, it's the last. Most shut down after the 2009 inspection wave. But Ellery kept hers alive. She was clever with paperwork. Ellery Voss. Mari traced the name, circled 3 times in black ink. You trust her? She knew how to manage the gray areas, Isla said. Licensing, transfers, making the rescues look legal enough to avoid raids. If anyone can clear Silas's name, it's her. The folder weighed heavier in Mary's hands. Ohio, barely 2 hours north. Close but far enough to clash with the council meeting where Carter would press for evacuation. If I miss it, she said quietly, he'll call me absent. Like I don't care. He'll do that regardless, Isla answered softly. Carter doesn't want approval. He wants to grind you down, make you look guilty just by showing up. Mari traced the bent corner of the folder, jaw set. Wind pressed through the boards and the walls groaned. A goat bleated sharply outside, hooves clattering on metal, followed by a horse's uneasy call. The whole place stirred, messy, raw, but stubbornly alive. Isla crouched by a stack of crates, pulled out a wool blanket, and laid it over the desk chair. If we go tomorrow, we'll be back by dusk, she said. I'll drive. You don't have to decide now. But if you want the truth about Silas, you won't find it sitting here. Mari turned toward the doorway. In the next room, Layla slept curled on a bag, an open book on her chest, one arm wrapped around the long-haired tabby, whose tail twitched in dreams. A knot rose in Mari's throat. She shifted her gaze away. The folder tightened under her fingers. The air seemed denser, charged like the sky before a storm. Every noise from the pens rang clearer now, less background, more summons. As if the animals themselves were calling her to choose. On the wall, the old map sagged corners, curling. Red lines still marked Silas's roots. One arrowed straight toward Ohio, as if he had known she would need that road someday. Mari closed the drawer slowly, the metal scraping echoing through the wooden beams. Layla stirred in her sleep, murmured something incoherent, then fell silent again. She didn't move toward the door. She stayed where she was, surrounded by the soft rustle of hay and the low hum of animals settling in for the night. One page from the folder slipped loose and fluttered to the ground. Mari bent to pick it up, pausing mid-motion, as a distant howl rang out through the woods, thin, uncertain, not quite wolf or dog. The sound lingered for a moment, then faded, leaving only the quiet scratch of claws somewhere behind the wall. She glanced down at the page still in her hand. Ellery's name circled again beneath it, a barely legible note. If something happens, she knows. Mary's eyes flicked once more toward the sleeping shape of her daughter, one hand still nestled in the fur of a cat that had decided to stay. She didn't speak. But her other hand, the one not holding the file, reached for the keys, still dangling from a nail by the door. Tomorrow she thought there would be work to do, real work, not hiding in papers or memories. The kind that used brushes, nails, and steady hands. The next afternoon, the brush slid easily across the worn slats, pale green paint, soaking into thirsty wood. Mari dipped it again, careful not to splatter her shirt. Sunlight filtered through the slanted boards, laying soft ribbons of gold across the straw-covered floor. Near the far gate, Layla crouched beside a rusted trough, hammering a nameplate onto the post. "This one's Sugar," she called out, wiping sweat from her temple with her sleeve. "The goat with the crooked ear." Mari offered a quiet smile, her brush continuing its rhythm. She'd already repainted half the front wall, and though her shoulders ached, there was something grounding in the repetition, like she was putting things back into place without needing to fully understand them. A crunch of tires on gravel broke the quiet. Isla appeared in the doorway, waving as she entered, with three others trailing behind, two women and a tall man with faded jeans and a deep tan. They moved like people who already knew where the feed was kept, where the buckets were stored, where the fences tended to give. Mari Isla called, gesturing toward them. "These are some of Silas's old crew, Avery, Ruth, and Bo. Thought they could lend a hand." Mary hesitated a beat, then nodded. Ruth was already rolling up her sleeves, walking toward the hay bales stacked lopsided in the corner. Avery adjusted the portable radio she carried, static crackling, before soft folk music trickled out. "I remember when your dad hauled a wounded deer all the way from Tennessee," Bo said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Bullet had gone clean through its side. 4 hours in his truck singing to it the whole way. Thing made it too." Layla's head shot up. He sang to it. "Off-key," Avery added, grinning, "but with heart." Layla eventually painted the image of the deer on a scrap of plywood using whatever leftover colors she could find: burnt orange for the antlers, smudged blue across the stomach, where the wound must have been. She fixed it to the wall beside the main pen, just beneath the name signs. Laughter carried through the yard. Chickens rustled, goats bleated at nothing in particular, and the radio hummed beneath the steady rhythm of voices. Someone unearthed a jug of lemonade. Even Marie leaned back and allowed herself a pause, her palms resting loosely on her knees. Toward evening, shadows stretched long across the gravel paths, burnished gold in the fading light. Layla gathered tools while humming the last tune from the radio. The crew packed up slowly, trading numbers, promising to return, offering supplies for next time. Mari shook each hand, grateful but slightly distant. Once the yard had emptied and Layla had curled into a hammock strung between two beams, Mari slipped quietly toward the office shed, where they had stored the old surveillance system. The power switch clicked. The tiny monitor flickered, grainy as ever. She cycled through the camera angles: barn entrance feed, shed west gate. Nothing new appeared. Her hand reached for the drawer where the memory card had been labeled and tucked neatly behind the radio cables. Gone. She searched again, lifting cables, shifting the notebook, checking beneath the tin of screws, and the chipped mug Layla had decorated with little red paw prints. The slot gaped open. No forced entry. No dust disturbed. Mari stood, motionless, blinking slowly while the hum of the screen filled the room. Through the window, the last light of day pooled across the gravel drive. The upper panes of the barn caught the orange sky, a glare shimmering over the glass. Her gaze fixed on it. That was the very window from the footage, the one where Silas had once spoken in whispers to a man whose face never came clear, though the voice had carried a name. Beauregard. Words failed her. She stepped back, eyes still locked on the reflection, the barn now empty, except for the faint scratching of a raccoon nesting in the loft. Her fingers hovered above the desk, unsure what to grasp. Almost without thought, she shut the drawer and murmured, "Voss will know." The name steadied her, a thread pulling her toward the next step. The air carried the scent of wet plywood and forgotten files as Mari followed Isla up the rickety steps to the sagging porch, where Ellery Voss waited with a cigarette burned nearly to the filter. His shoulders stooped, hands trembling slightly as he gestured them through the doorway. Piles of paper teetered on every surface. Boxes of dog-eared folders and water-stained envelopes crowded the walls. Overhead, a rusted fan spun slowly, its dull whir slicing the silence. The original signatures had been blacked out in one version, then replaced in the margins in messier handwriting. They said the place failed sanitation, overcrowded, improper classification of species. Voss's eyes narrowed. Except that's not what the original said. Mari scanned the lines, all animals evaluated in acceptable condition. Feed and medical access, consistent with regulatory standards. She looked up. Who changed this? Voss pointed to the corner of the document. C. Beauregard. He wasn't with the shelter board. He worked land zoning, but he was part of the inspection group that day. Next thing I know, our licenses were frozen. Silas's records sealed. Isla let out a sharp breath. He forged government inspection. He didn't forge. He leaned. Voss flicked his cigarette into a jar filled with sand. They didn't need to fake it. Just imply Silas couldn't meet state standards. Revoke his right to shelter. Threaten anyone who vouched for him. Quietly, of course. Very civilized. Mari's stomach clenched. Her thumb grazed the edge of the plastic sleeve. Why would Carter do that? Because land with failed zoning becomes a blank slate. No legal easement. No sanctuary protections. Just open acreage waiting to be scooped up cheap. Voss said, lowering himself slowly onto the edge of a wooden bench. Your father stood in the way of that. She sat motionless, her breath slowing to match the uneasy rhythm of the fan. Isla glanced at her, then at Voss. Do you have any proof beyond this? Voss gave a small, humorless laugh. You think they left trails? They erased everything with suits and smiles. He handed Mari another sheet. It was a notarized memo, not government-issued, just a signed affidavit from a former volunteer named Harper. Not Isla. Another Harper. The note described a meeting where Silas was threatened with land seizure unless he stopped importing animals from out of state. He didn't stop, Voss said quietly. He just got better at hiding. Mari folded the documents, pressing the edges flat with her palm. A dull ache pulsed behind her eyes. Voss stepped closer. You really want to dig this up? You're not going to find justice in the places you think. Only more rot. She met his gaze. I don't want justice, she said. I want the truth. He stared at her, something unreadable flickering beneath his heavy lids. Then he turned away. Isla placed a hand on Mari's back as they stepped outside. The sun had dipped behind thick clouds and the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of ozone and rain. Gravel shifted beneath their feet as they reached the car. Mari slid into the passenger seat, fingers still wrapped around the reports. A low rumble caught her ear. Isla turned the key in the ignition, but Mari's gaze moved to the side mirror. Across the street, a dark SUV idled behind an overgrown hedgerow. No plates visible, windows tinted black, just far enough not to look obvious. Isla glanced back. You know that car? Mari didn't answer. The SUV didn't follow when they pulled onto the highway, but it didn't move either. Mari tightened her grip on the folder. Her eyes stayed on the mirror until the trees swallowed the house behind them. She didn't speak again, not even when the SUV vanished from sight. By the time they reached Quinn Hollow, the silence in the cab was so taut it felt ready to snap. Back at the farmhouse, Layla tugged open the loose floorboard with a grunt, her fingers dusty and scraped. She'd only meant to find a dry place to hide her sketch pad, somewhere the wind wouldn't catch her pages, but curiosity had a sharper pull than caution. The air below carried a stale chill, like something sealed off for too long. Mama, she called up the stairs, voice bouncing off the concrete walls. There's something weird down here. Mari descended quickly, boots echoing with each step, her hands still stained from mending a broken hinge in the main barn. Layla pointed to the corner, where the dull glint of steel peeked through a pile of sun-bleached tarps. They uncovered it together, a squat, rust-flecked cabinet with two padlocks. One lock hung brittle with time, the other looked newer, its surface smooth, unscratched. Mari bent, testing both. The old one gave way with a twist and groan. The new resisted. She slid a flathead screwdriver from her back pocket, wedged it into the latch, and with a sharp knock from her palm, snapped the second lock clean. The doors creaked open. Inside, wrapped in faded flannel, and resting atop a stack of manila folders, sat a trail camera. It wasn't like the security ones mounted around the barn. It was bulkier, built for movement, night vision rain. A hunter's camera, or something meant to witness when no one else was watching. Beneath it, a bundle of documents bound in red ribbon. Mari untied it slowly. Each file bore the name of an animal sanctuary, most she vaguely remembered from newspaper blurbs now long shuttered. One by one, she flipped through the pages. Red stamps marked closed by order, non-compliant, or worse, seized. Then came the signatures. C. Beauregard. Scrawled at the bottom of almost every termination notice. Mari's stomach tightened. She powered on the camera. Its screen buzzed faintly before flickering to life. A low-resolution video began to play green-tinted from night vision. The frame shook for a moment, then steadied. Animals shuffled within a fenced pen, figures, barely visible but alive. Breathing. Two men stepped into view. One wore a dark vest with a federal inspection badge clipped to the pocket. The other carried a clipboard. Carter's voice came first, unmistakably casual. "Just shove the violations through me. I'll handle the paper. The second this land changes hands, it's not our problem." The other man nodded, grunted agreement. Another clip autoplayed. Silas stood alone this time, framed by half light and shadow. His hands were in his coat pockets. His expression unreadable, but his voice rang clear. "You think shutting this place down will make you clean, but you can't kill what lives in a man's gut. Compassion doesn't die just because someone signs the right form." Mari paused the feed. Silas's face froze on the screen mid-sentence. She stared at it as though willing the image to explain itself. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, something colder. The feeling you get when you realize your worst suspicions weren't paranoid after all. She thumbed Isla's number. 1 ring, 2, then voicemail. She hung up and tried again. Nothing. The folders in her lap suddenly weighed heavier. Each signature, each shuttered rescue, a pattern long buried. She wrapped the camera in the flannel again, careful, and cradled it in one arm. Her other hand held the documents tight to her chest. Slowly she climbed the stairs, her breath quickening as the walls narrowed behind her. Light from the kitchen windows poured into the hallway, the late sun casting long bars of gold across the floor. The barn outside buzzed faintly with movement, goats calling to each other, wings fluttering in the rafters. Comforting sounds but distant. Mari stepped onto the porch, her boots crunching against old leaves, then stopped. A black SUV sat idling near the edge of the property. Her first instinct was to scan for Layla. The girl wasn't in sight, but laughter drifted from the barn, still painting names on stalls unaware. Mari's eyes shifted. A man stood just beyond the gate, tall, broad, dressed in a fitted dark jacket, sunglasses too sleek for this dusty place. His hands hung loose by his sides. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there silent as the trees. Mari didn't approach. Her grip on the documents tightened, pulse ticking at her throat. The man didn't retreat either. The engine purred behind him. Somewhere above, a hawk cried once, then vanished into cloud. She stepped back inside, didn't bother to close the door. Behind her, the screen door creaked open in the wind. Mari set the documents on the table, but her hand never left them. If they wanted to watch her, let them. Tomorrow she'd stop hiding in barns and bring the fight where everyone could see it. The next evening, Mari braced against the polished wood railing in the Maplewood Town Hall chamber as council members took their seats. The smell of varnish and soft leather of worn chairs hung in the air. Layla sat beside her, shoulders, rigid sketchbook closed. The USB drive weighed heavy in Mary's coat pocket, a secret she hadn't yet dared to share. Carter Beauregard rose from his seat behind the dais. He adjusted the microphone, leaned in, looking directly at Mari with calm eyes. "Members of the council, citizens," he began, voice even. "We have before us fresh evidence suggesting that Quinn Hollow Sanctuary continues to operate in ways that endanger both public welfare and environmental safety. Contamination of soil, uncontained animals, and failure to secure proper licensing, all documented in this report." He clicked a remote. A projector came alive. A slide showed what appeared to be goats wandering beyond a broken fence. Another showed animals near stagnant water. Then a video, grainy edited. In that video, a car swerved to avoid a goat crossing a road at dusk. Backyards showed damaged gardens. One scene featured chickens in a yard next to a school playground. Sound cut in and out. Laughter overlaid audio that seemed stitched together. Mari stood, heart pounding, fingers curled at her side. She lifted a hand as though to say something, but the chairwoman's gavel tapped sharply. "Please remain seated, Ms. Quinn," the chairwoman said. "There will be time for your remarks after this presentation." Mari's mouth opened. She tried to speak. No sound came. Her voice was muted by procedure. She glanced at Layla. The girl's eyes were wide, fixed on the screen. Mari felt anger rising, but also desperation. She reached into her pocket, hesitating fingers, brushing against the USB drive. She considered pulling it out, show the uncut video, the raw footage she'd found in the box with 2 locks. But every eye in the room was already on her. Exposure might backfire. Misstep could end up confirming suspicions instead of clearing them. Isla's chair empty. Mary's heart sank. Was Isla not attending, or had she been stopped? Mary glanced toward the door, then back at the dais. Carter watched her lips curved into something like satisfaction. Another neighbor stood, a man in a flannel shirt, clear voice. If what they're saying's true, the animals escape kids follow them on the road. How many complaints have you fielded? Miss Quinn Marie's throat tightened. She opened her mouth once more, then the microphone cut off. Every protest she tried died in that silence. Councilwoman Diaz cleared her throat. We will now proceed to vote, her voice echoing, on freezing all operations at Quinn Hollow until further investigation. Murmurs broke out among citizens. Some gasped. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Layla's hand squeezed Mari's. Mari swallowed. Inventory of every accusation, every edited clip, every missing affidavit wound tight in her mind. One by one, council members tapped the voting buttons. Blue then red lights. A small bell rang when the final vote was cast. Frozen. Mari rose from the bench without rising in spirit. She turned steps echoing across the wood floor. Her umbrella dropped a soft pat on the tiled entryway as she passed Carter. He smiled low, just enough to show he knew he'd won. He stage managed this, Mari thought, but didn't speak. Carter leaned toward his secretary, whispering something short. The secretary nodded, flipping through some papers. As Mari reached the exit doors, Layla followed quietly. The corridor beyond the chamber smelled of polish and old carpet. Light spilled in from tall windows. Outside, dusk was beginning to settle, humming in the cooling air. Mari paused for a moment, fingers tightening around the USB in her pocket. The drive felt like a promise, or a threat. Carter's words drifted behind them, audible only in the hush that followed. Curtain hasn't dropped yet. There's one more move. Mari didn't look back. She stepped into the hall past the crowd, the echo of his words following her out into the night. Sleep would not come easily, if it came at all. Gray morning light settled low over the fields, muting the edges of everything. Dew clung to the tall grass, like a warning that hadn't quite taken shape. Marie stood at the edge of the main barn, her arms wrapped around herself as the first city vehicle rolled up the dirt drive. Men and women in dark windbreakers stepped out. They moved with quiet precision, clipboards tucked under arms, tags and scanners in hand. No one met her eyes. One of them, a tall man with a nasal voice, approached. We're here to begin the preliminary tagging for transport. We'll be placing temporary seals on high occupancy structures. Mary didn't move. She nodded once, but her face stayed still, unreadable. Behind her, the sanctuary's familiar rhythms cracked. Waffles, the one-eyed mutt Silas had taken in a decade ago, snarled when an officer reached for his collar. He backed against the chicken coop. Teeth-bared fur spiked. Another worker looped a catch pole, but Waffles darted sideways, colliding with a rusted trough. Metal clanged. Chickens scattered. Layla's scream tore through the air. Don't touch him. He's not dangerous. He's scared. 2 officers stepped forward. One held her back as she fought to reach the dog. Mary's voice caught in her throat. Layla flailed, feet slipping in the wet grass, arms reaching. Let her go, Mari finally said, but her voice broke in the middle. No one did. Waffles was pinned, tagged, loaded into a carrier. His nails scraped the metal. He didn't howl, just thumped once against the crate wall and went quiet. Layla sobbed so hard she hiccuped. Her body folded into itself. Mari bent to gather her arms, wrapping tightly around the girl's shoulders, but her own knees buckled. They sank together into the earth. For the first time since her mother's funeral, Mari cried without stopping it. Grief moved through her like something physical, something thick, older than language. One of the officers cleared his throat, uncomfortable. From behind them, an engine idled. The sound was too clean for a farm road. Carter Beauregard leaned against the door of his silver Range Rover aviators on despite the cloudy sky. He didn't raise his voice, didn't wave, just waited until she looked. She did. He walked up slowly, the gravel giving slightly under his polished shoes. Didn't need to be this way, he said quietly. You could have sold, could have spared yourself and her this theater. Mari's lips parted. She meant to answer, but no sound formed. her voice still caught somewhere behind that guttural cry. Carter didn't press. Instead, he reached into his coat and produced a folder. One signature. You get to leave clean. New start, maybe by the ocean. She gets to keep her school, her health plan. He handed her a pen. You think this is a threat, he said softly, but honestly, it's mercy. Mari stared down at the folder. Her reflection stared back in the pen's silver clip eyes, swollen hair, fraying around her temples, flecks of hay and dirt stuck to her sleeves. She didn't take the pen, nor the folder. Carter shrugged once and turned, walking back to his car. The door shut with a soft click. His tires didn't spray gravel, they moved deliberately smoothly out of view. By sunset, the sanctuary fell into unnatural silence. The usual rustle of fur feathers and breath had faded. Only the faint creak of a wind vane and the occasional moan of the barn beams remained. Murray sat alone in the office, cross-legged on a splintered floorboard. The lights were off. Only the glow of the laptop lit her face. She clicked play again. The camera's footage flickered, static dancing for a split second. Then Silas's voice cut through. You can push paper all you want, but you can't kill compassion. His face didn't look heroic in the grainy clip. He looked exhausted. Dirt under his nails collar, askew eyes a little sunken. Still, something in the way he stood firm, unflinching, struck her chest. The image crackled again. The barn behind him. A shadow moved in the far background. Maybe Carter, maybe someone else. Mari leaned closer to the screen, trying to catch details. But the clip ended abruptly, frame freezing on Silas mid-breath. She didn't blink. A knock echoed faintly from somewhere in the dark house. She didn't stand. The screen still glowed, replaying that one frame over and over again. Silas' eyes forward, as if daring someone not to understand. Mari shut the laptop at last, the echo of the knock still crawling under her skin. Her feet carried her toward the barn, as though the only answers left might be waiting in the place he had once called his own. The stall where Silas once slept still smelled faintly of hay and antiseptic. Dust coated the beams. Rust had eaten into the old cot's legs. Mari hadn't entered this part of the barn in days, maybe weeks. Too many things to fix elsewhere. Too many choices to make. But tonight something pulled her back. She crouched near the cot, brushing away a pile of yellowed straw. Her fingers found the corner of a crumpled envelope, half tucked beneath a plank. It was the same envelope Layla had found weeks ago, the one with clippings and old notes. But something was off. A second fold. Mari sat on the edge of the cot and carefully unfolded it. A single sheet, creased but intact, fell into her lap. The handwriting's sharp, narrow loops was unmistakably her father's. Mari, if you're reading this, then either I've already failed, or maybe there's still something left worth saving. She read slowly. The ink smudged in places, as if written with a shaky hand, or maybe one that knew it wouldn't get to rewrite the words. I trusted Carter once. Thought he understood what we were building here. He wore a suit and knew the right names to mention. I believed in what he said about making the work legal, expanding, getting grants. I signed things I didn't understand. Let inspectors in. Let the wrong people in. Mari's jaw clenched. Her gaze slid to the far wall, where a photograph of Silas with a baby deer still hung, its frame-cracked glass, long gone. They came in with flashlights and cameras. Said I was hoarding, endangering. Told the papers I was running a black market shelter. When I asked questions, the records disappeared. Licenses revoked overnight. My name erased from places I helped to build. And Carter, he stood behind it all, smiling like none of it mattered. A drop of sweat ran along Mari's spine. The air in the room had thickened. I didn't fight back the way I should have. I hid instead. I stayed quiet and kept rescuing animals behind locked gates. Maybe that makes me a coward. Or maybe it means I never stopped trying. There was no anger in the words, just wait. A quiet resignation she recognized all too well. I know I'm not the father you needed, and maybe I was never meant to be, but this place, Quinn Hollow, was never about me. It was about what we protect when no one else will. And if you're holding this letter, if you're here now, then maybe, just maybe, you still believe that. The final line shook. If you never find this letter, maybe I made it. But if you're reading it now, then there's still time to finish what I couldn't. No signature, just a smear of dirt at the bottom corner where a thumb had pressed down. Behind her, a boot scraped the concrete. Mari looked up. Isla stood in the doorway, face pale beneath the harsh barn light. Her jacket clung damply to her arms, hair frizzed from the drizzle outside. "They're watching me," Isla said quietly. "I didn't mean to disappear. I lost service for almost 48 hours. Every time I opened a drive, it redirected, and someone wiped 3 folders from my cloud." Mari didn't answer. She held the letter out instead. Isla took it, read the first few lines, then lowered it with a slow exhale. "We have to move fast," she said, "before they shut everything down." "I know," Mari murmured and stood. In the farmhouse, she booted up the ancient laptop she used for filing inventory. The screen flickered twice before settling. The USB plugged in with a soft click. A folder popped open, 3 files, time-stamped over a decade ago. The largest one bore the name Beauregard, 2006-1 MP. Isla leaned over her shoulder. "Have you seen this one?" Mari shook her head. A gust of wind knocked against the side window, rattling the glass in its frame. Outside, the barn light swung slightly, casting long shadows over the yard. Marie's hand hovered over the trackpad. From the stall behind them came a restless noise, hooves shifting a soft whinny. Waffles. Then another sound. Metal on metal. Mari froze. Not from the barn, from the porch. She turned to Isla. No words needed. They moved together, quick but quiet, to the front door. Just beyond the window, the silhouette of a man stood motionless under the eaves. Black coat, no movement, no voice, just waiting. Mari reached for the laptop, tucked it under her arm. Isla grabbed the car keys. They didn't turn on the porch light. Just the sound of boots over wooden boards and the distant creak of the barn gate opening itself again, though no wind had stirred. Neither woman spoke as they drove away, the glow of the sanctuary shrinking in the rearview mirror. Whatever was coming next would not be fought in shadows but in daylight. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Folding chairs filled the space, some occupied by familiar townspeople, others by strangers drawn by the rumors. At the front, a projector screen stood tall, humming softly. Mari stood behind the podium, both hands resting flat against the wood as the murmur of voices quieted. Her voice didn't waver when she spoke. "My name is Mari Quinn. I'm the legal inheritor of the Quinn Hollow Sanctuary, and I have evidence, documented, time-stamped, corroborated, that the allegations made against Silas Quinn and against this sanctuary were not only false but deliberately fabricated." She paused, scanned the rows. Some looked curious. A few leaned back, arms crossed. But most listened now. She raised a thin folder, pages marked with the faded letterhead of the Department of Agricultural Oversight. "This," she said, holding it aloft, "is the original inspection report from 2006, signed off by Ellery Voss. The version in city records shows a failing grade, but this copy shows compliance, full marks in every category." From the front row, someone scoffed. She ignored it. Mari opened the laptop on the stand beside her, inserted the USB. "And this," she continued, "is a conversation recorded in the same year between Carter Beauregard and a representative from Hillwell Development Group." The video flickered to life on the screen. Carter's younger face filled the frame, dressed in federal issue badge visible. He stood near the edge of a wire enclosure, nodding at a man with a clipboard. The audio crackled. "Quinn's not bending. Says it's sanctuary, not for sale. You want it clean on paper, of course. I'll handle the paper. We flag him for illegal hold. Say he's trafficking. By next quarter, it's clear." A wave of murmurs spread. Carter, seated 2 rows back, stood up abruptly. "That's enough," he barked, moving toward the aisle. "This is edited. It's out of context." Mari turned slowly. "That clip's metadata is intact. It's untouched, Carter." He lunged toward the laptop, but a young technician moved between them. The guy couldn't have been more than 20, wiry, wearing a Maplewood high hoodie. He raised both hands. "You can't shut it down," he said firmly. "Citizen-submitted evidence is protected under public forum law." Phones lifted around the room. Several attendees had already begun recording. A girl with a press badge tapped her screen, live streaming. Carter's expression twitched. "You people have no idea what this place really is." "Maybe," Mari said, holding his gaze. "But we know what it's not, and it's not yours." He stood frozen, then turned sharply and stormed toward the exit shoulder, clipping a chair on the way out. The door slammed. In the silence that followed, a woman from the third row, a former vet Mari recognized from the animal shelter downtown, stood slowly. My sister adopted 2 goats from Quinn Hollow in 2004, she said. They lived longer than expected. Never sick. That place saved more than just animals. Others began rising, one after another. A man from the Parks Committee, a teenager Mary had seen sketching in the sanctuary. Even Mrs. Langford, Layla's old piano teacher, who had once refused to speak to Mary in public, lifted her hand. More phones came out. One woman whispered something to her friend, then stepped forward with tears in her eyes. Mari stood still at the podium, uncertain what to say. The young technician leaned in, voice low. I've got everything backed up. Multiple drives. Cloud copies up too. Mari blinked. Why? He shrugged. Because someone has to do the right thing. In the back of the hall, Layla pressed against the wall, clutching her sketchbook. She caught Mari's eye, then smiled, small but sure. Mari exhaled slowly, fingers curling slightly on the edge of the stand. The video continued in the background, a looping image of Silas in the barn patting a large dog's head. You can't kill compassion, he said on screen, voice crackling, even if you bury it. Mari looked down at the USB, now warm to the touch from hours of use. A single object, but it had cracked open something far bigger. From the far side of the hall, someone called out. What happens now? Mari lifted her head. The question wasn't hers to answer, but it would be hers to lead. She stepped back from the podium just as the doors opened again, this time slowly. The town clerk entered, carrying a folder with a gold seal. She handed it to the moderator, who squinted, then turned toward Mari. You'll want to see this, he said. But before she could respond, another sound interrupted, paw steps echoing in the hall's entrance. Waffles, tail high, trotted through the open door, like he'd known the way all along. The room broke into soft murmurs, part disbelief, part relief. Mari kept her eyes on the folder, its seal catching the light, knowing tomorrow would bring sharper questions and heavier answers. Morning light filtered through high windows in the Maplewood Hall, slicing beams across the polished floor. Rows of people filled the room. Journalists with cameras, residents clutching signs, children perched beside grandparents. Tension moved through the air like static. Council members sat at the front, faces etched with fatigue. Carter Beauregard stood at his place suit, immaculate eyes narrowed. He raised his hand as a councilwoman began speaking. So, Mr. Beauregard, she said, voice firm, we have confirmed multiple documents showing corruption and manipulation tied to your actions. The inspection reports you submitted as proof have inconsistencies. There's also evidence you influenced closure petitions of rescue shelters to acquire property cheaply. Carter's lips tightened. He exhaled slowly. These are allegations, not facts, he replied. Many reports are decades old, some decades irrelevant. Another council member, a woman from the Finance Committee, spoke next. Irrelevant only if we ignore signatures. Your name appears on filings we now know were forged. On several rescue shelters that closed, those same shelters had caring volunteers, medical records, documentation, corroborated independently. Are we to believe all those people lied? Mari sat in the audience, her chest pressed tight, but her voice did not quiver. She remained still, clutching the folder with the affidavit, the video files. Isla sat beside her, shoulders tense but supportive. One man with a sheriff badge leaned forward. I need you to answer. Did you instruct an inspector to falsify reports so you could buy adjoining land? Did you know the consequences of those inspections, that homes lost pets, that animals were euthanized or removed unjustly? Carter's face hardened. He looked toward the crowd, then back at the dais. My actions, when scrutinized, stand in legal boundary. If some enforcement stepped too far, that is not my directive. I paid fees. I filed forms. I consulted. In that moment, Layla slipped out of her seat. Mari watched, her heart pounding. The child carried a folded sheet of paper. Hands trembling, Layla stepped forward to the microphone. My grandfather kept a journal, Layla said. Voice steady, though cheeks were pink with shame and hope. He wrote, my name doesn't need to be remembered. But if even one of the creatures I saved lives to see another spring, then I don't regret the price. Half the hall gasped. Mari's throat closed as she fought back tears. Layla unfolded the paper with careful precision. Eyes shining, she looked at Carter, then at the people. The room held its breath. A woman raised her voice from the back. We owed him more than what we've given, something more than silence. A man in flannel stood next. He put down his sign, wiped his hands on his jeans. "We called that place a zoo once," he said, laughed behind his back. "But a cat I brought from Quinn Hollow lived 13 years, never sicker than a sniffle." Applause stirred, hesitant at first, then gathering strength. One clap, another, then more. Not a roar, but rising, enough to shift the room's weight. Carter's face lost its composure. He stood as though trying to find air. He unlocked his jacket, buttoned and unbuttoned it. Then he turned, stepping past desks and microphones. Each footstep echoed. He didn't speak. Not today. The doors opened behind him. He passed through, silhouette dim, the light behind him brighter. A council clerk whispered something to a reporter. Flashlights winked. Phones recorded. Mari watched Carter leave. Her knees felt soft. She still gripped the folder. Layla returned, stepping quietly back to Mary's side. Their hands found each other intertwined. The gallery began to stir, some nodding, others wiping eyes. Murmurs echoed. A few voices choked back. Marie closed hers. The folder slipped to her lap. Claps continued, drifting like a wave across rows. Not loud, but insistent. A recognition not all will admit. Mari inhaled, steadying herself. The price of a name wasn't applause. It was truth. And tonight, truth had walked across that stage and lingered in the heart of the hall. As Carter's steps faded through the open doorway and the light behind the exit frame dimmed, Mari felt the weight settle deeper. She knew the night would not bring rest, only questions waiting for the morning. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale apricot and soft gray. Mari settled in the high meadow behind the stalls, knees pulled up, journal resting on her thighs. Grass pressed against her calves, dew glistening at each tip. Insects hummed under a light breeze. Somewhere a goat chewed cud. Somewhere else a bird warbled a lonely song. The world breathed gently around her. Silas's journal lay open. She read the scratched ink slowly, paragraph by paragraph, as though tasting something she once knew. Each word carried weight. She paused at a margin note: July 3rd. Rabbit with broken paw. Stayed by the fire all night. Layla laughed when it sneezed in its sleep. Her lips barely moved as she spoke it in her head. The memory bloomed unexpectedly. Turning a page, she found where leather binding had torn. On the back, in thick blue marker, scrawled by a child's hand, Layla, summer, 22. A drawing of a floppy-eared dog in a cape hovered beneath. A breath escaped her. She pressed a fingertip to the ink. It felt colder than she expected. Sticky, faintly rusted with old tears. She closed her eyes and recalled holding Layla that first afternoon after the funeral. Mari had carried her through rain to a graveyard where names were carved in stone. Her mother-in-law's voice, sharp, bitter, had pierced through the damp air. "A child with a mother like you doesn't have a future." Mari remembered how the words sank into her, how she pressed them into silence, built walls around herself so the echoes couldn't escape. Her chest tightened, but tears did not come. She exhaled gently. The ache receded into something quieter. Not absence, but acknowledgement. The weight loosened just enough. A soft footstep rustled behind her. Isla appeared silent, a hand resting on Mari's shoulder. No questions asked, no advice given, just solidity. Mari closed the journal, letting pages fall back into place. She touched the spine. Weathered leather. Silas's scent of old books and barn dust seemed to linger in the fibers. "You know," Mari whispered, "I thought moving forward would mean forgetting. Now I realize it means carrying what's true, not just what hurts." Isla nodded, neither agreeing nor disagreeing out loud. They sat in stillness, letting the meadow hold them as the sun climbed higher. Shadows shifted, light lengthened, dew evaporated. A quiet chorus of grazing mouths, breathing animals' wings stirred in hidden nests. Mari's hand tightened around the journal, her fingers brushing the brown leather binding. She opened it again, reading Silas's words. "If you're holding this and I'm gone, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't trust quiet rooms and friendly offers." The lines cut deep. She folded the page and held both journal and memory together. The guilt, the doubt, the ache, they all seemed less sharp when shared with the grass and sky. Something stirred in the distance, Layla's voice bright and trembling. "Mom, I think Sugar's about to have her babies." Mari's heart jolted, breath caught in her chest. She stood, the journal pressed into her side. Isla rose too, brushing dirt off her jeans. Mari didn't pause again. She ran long strides across the undulating meadow. Tall stalks brushed her arms. The earth beneath her boots hummed. Isla's pace matched hers, hands swinging breaths even. By the time they neared the barn, the sky was streaked in gold. Light poured through cracks in the wood, falling in slanted lines across straw and animal crates. Mary's shadow leapt ahead, stretching long and thin across the threshold. She burst through the door, arms reaching. The moment held Sugar down in the straw body, heaving calves pressing through wet fur. Layla bent close to her. Isla dropped beside them. Mari reached forward, and then the barn split open with that piercing newborn cry. Layla gasped. Mari's knees gave way into the hay. Isla's grip clamped around her hand. Beyond the walls, the meadow rustled in applause for the things that fight to live. For one brief night, life had claimed the ground. Yet Mari already sensed morning would pull her back into battles, waged not among animals, but in courtrooms. Heat and rust lingered on the courthouse steps. Media vans lined the curb like vultures bristling with wires. Mari kept to the wrought iron fence, hands resting loosely on the top rail a few yards from the crowd. Layla stood at her side, thumb hooked into her belt loop, eyes locked on the double doors. The verdict arrived softly, in stark contrast to the noise that had led there. Council members read the findings aloud. Carter Beauregard, formally charged with falsifying public records, obstruction of justice, and profiting from the forced shutdown of rescue operations. 3 former employees submitted confessions. 2 even stood before the room, trembling yet steady in their voices. No cheers followed. Only a long, shared exhale, relief mixed with recognition, like hearing a storm had passed but not yet daring to step out. Reporters surged across the marble stairs, mics thrust into faces. Carter slipped through a side exit. No cuffs, but no triumph either. He never met the crowd's eyes. Sleeves rolled, collar loosened, he walked like a man intent on vanishing into shadow. Mari spoke no word. Her name rippled in whispers, mispronounced, twisted. A woman pushed a clipboard toward her. Another extended a microphone. "Do you have anything to say about your father?" Her eyelids lowered once, unflinching, before she looked down at Layla. "He doesn't need anyone to understand him," she said quietly. "He only ever needed the animals to live one more season." She turned away. The microphone hovered behind her, a question already answered. The day unraveled in fragments, forms, signed brief nods in narrow hallways. Isla laid out the full network diagram to a nonprofit task force. They accepted it without ceremony, promising review, legal aid, and national recognition. She spoke little, but when she placed the last folder on the table, her fingers lingered a moment too long. Everyone noticed. Toward evening, the air cooled. Marie returned to Quinn Hollow, where the gates now stood open without protest. A new wooden sign waited there. Edges, raw letters cut clean. Silas Quinn, Sanctuary, in service of the voiceless. Her eyes traced the words before she stepped forward, gravel crunching beneath her boots. Vines from the old gate curled around a post, swaying in the breeze, as though uncertain, clinging or releasing. Within the grounds, the animals had settled. Sugar slept curled with her newborns. Waffles let out a soft bark from the paddock, tail wagging even in rest. A hawk swept overhead, its shadow glancing across the barn roof. Mari leaned against the fence to watch. She spoke nothing. There was no need. Behind her, Layla nudged a stone with the toe of her shoe, then lifted her gaze. "So? Does this mean we get to stay here?" Mary tilted her head, considering, then nodded once as slow. "We stay," she said. Isla arrived not long after. She carried 2 bags of feed in a folder under one arm. They didn't hug, but they didn't need to. She set the bag down, glanced at the new sign, then smiled at the goats nosing the gate. "The press will move on soon," Isla said, "and then it'll just be about building again." Mari adjusted the straps of her overalls. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of watching people talk." Ayla chuckled low in her throat. As evening deepened, a soft orange hue washed over the sanctuary. Birds gathered on the power lines, silhouetted against the last light. The faint clink of a bell echoed from the far end of the pasture. No one spoke for a while. The wind shifted again. A few loose petals from wildflowers danced down the path. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, steady, sure, ancient. Mari closed her eyes and listened. The animals didn't testify, but they were still here, still breathing, still living. And as the night deepened, she knew morning would bring something different, maybe fragile, maybe uncertain, but alive all the same. The first thing visitors noticed was the scent, fresh hay earth, still damp from last night's drizzle, and something sweet in the air that no one could quite place. It wasn't a perfume or anything artificial, just life. Quinn Hollow was open, not fully, not grandly. No banners, no speeches, just a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome," hung crooked on the gate. But the fence had been mended, the pathways cleared. Children ran between animal pens, their laughter rising above the gentle clatter of hooves and the low hum of chatter. Marie stood near the entrance, a clipboard in one hand and a half-eaten apple in the other. She wasn't quite sure how to host a community event. She only knew what she hoped people would feel, that something broken could be pieced back together. Each pen had a nameplate now. Sugar, Waffles, Tilly, Dancer. Someone had even made tiny laminated cards with fun facts about each animal tied to the fences with twine. Layla was in her element, trotting between guests with a confident voice. "This one's Mo. He likes broccoli more than carrots." A woman in a long denim skirt crouched low, listening to Layla as though the girl were Kentucky's foremost animal expert. Mari caught sight of the woman's face and blinked. Mrs. Dobbins, the same neighbor who had once demanded Silas's name be stricken from town records, was now pressing an envelope marked "For the Sanctuary" into Layla's hands. "You don't need to say anything," Mari said quietly when their paths crossed near the old goat barn. Mrs. Dobbins faltered. "I want to, though. I was wrong. A lot of us were." Mari offered no immediate reply. A small nod softened eyes, and then she watched the woman drift back into the crowd. The newly painted barn held a table staffed by volunteers with adoption forms. Cats dozed in crates lined with soft towels. Two brothers whispered about whether their father might let them bring one home. A high schooler strummed an acoustic guitar near the hay bales, and the mood settled into something Mari could only call simple, like breathing. By midday, Yesla appeared carrying an envelope pressed flat between two books. Her tiredness had a satisfied cast, as though the morning had been spent baking bread and the afternoon planting something worth keeping. "I thought you might want this," she said, holding it out. Mari accepted, carefully recognizing the faint torn edge before unfolding it. A photograph lay within yellowed creased once across the center. Silas, younger and long-haired, cradled a fawn. His mouth was unsmiling, yet the protective certainty in his gaze spoke louder than any grin. The image had once been ripped. Now strips of tape bound it back together. Her thumb followed the seam. The lines failed to align perfectly, which somehow made the picture feel truer. She leaned it against the entrance shelf directly beneath the sanctuary sign. No plaque, no frame, just a plain photograph catching the light like a window into what had been. For a while she stood, unmoving, hands clasped at her waist, a stance that carried both gratitude and endurance. A breeze stirred the grass, blending laughter with the crinkle of paper bags. Children fed goats with cautious fingers. Near the fence, someone tossed a ball for a border collie. The rhythm of the day unfolded with unforced ease. Then a voice rang out across the pasture. "Mom, you gotta come see this. Sugar had 4 babies." Layla's face peeked from behind the sheep pen, cheeks flushed with excitement. Her hands flailed above her head like victory flags. Mari smiled but didn't move just yet. She turned slightly, letting her eyes sweep across the land. The field stretched out, dotted with animals and people, and at the far end, the sanctuary sign rocked gently in the wind. The letters "Silas Quinn Sanctuary" shone faintly in the afternoon sun. The sound of hooves, laughter, lowing cows, and swaying grass rose and fell like a lullaby. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang once, clear and high. She took one breath, then another. Then she started walking. Some names never make it into history books, but sometimes the quiet fight to protect the voiceless, the small acts of defiance against injustice, leave the deepest mark. Mary didn't just reclaim land. She reclaimed the truth, dignity, and the right to choose compassion over silence. Because in the end, what we protect shapes who we become. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and follow for more emotional journeys like this one. We've only just begun.